They will do things only if it is of direct benefit to them. They will offer you free advice, like it happened during Operation Sindhu. Now if you ask them, saying, oh really, you're worried, why don't you look at your own region? Come to a position which is in the interest of the well-being and the safety of the people of Venezuela. People sitting far away will say things, sometimes with application of mind, sometimes not, sometimes the self-interest, sometimes carelessly. That will happen.
The question was around the events in Venezuela. Do you have any observations, both from an official point of view, but also your personal observations, on what precedent this sets or what your thoughts are?
I don't, particularly in public, have a distinction between my official and personal. Anything I say is the same. I think we put out a statement yesterday, so I would urge you to look at it. And obviously, what happened, essentially, if I can sum up the statement, the long and short of the statement was that yes, we are concerned at the developments, but we would really urge all the parties involved to now sit down and come to a position which is in the interest of the well-being and the safety of the people of Venezuela. Because at the end of the day, that is our concern. That we would want Venezuela as a country with whom over many years we've had very good relations. So we would like the people to come out well from whatever is the direction of events.
Hello, sir. First of all, big welcome to Luxembourg. I'm a big fan of yours and Mr. Modi and the team and the fantastic work that you're doing. I'm hugely admirative of the way in which you have maintained the strategic autonomy of India, particularly during the past years' developments. And my question was a little bit in continuation of what Deepak here was asking. With the recent developments, the order is changing in the way people are thinking and behaving, and the rule of might is prevailing. And particularly India, we have troubled neighbors on all our sides. So this might change the way they act and behave. How do you plan to address this going forward?
That's a very big question. It's a very big question. I'll tell you why. Partly, you are now saying, okay, the state of the world itself is different. But then you're also saying, okay, now take the state of the world and bring it to the neighborhood, and how does it impact on it? And if you look at the neighborhood, we have a number of neighbors, and actually each one of them is very different from the others. So I would invert I would start really from the neighborhood. And if you look at the neighborhood, and I'm looking at my own activities there, we had recently a very big natural disaster in our neighborhood, in Sri Lanka. A cyclone which was almost unprecedented in the damage that it did to Sri Lanka. On the very day that the cyclone started early in the morning, by that afternoon, our forces were there, which it also happened we had 2 ships in Colombo at that time. But apart from those ships, by that day our forces were there. We were deeply involved in the search and rescue operations as it intensified in providing relief to people, and then within literally a few days, I was sent by Prime Minister Modi to offer them a kind of a rebuilding recovery package of a very substantial size. Now, I'm starting there because whether it was what happened in Sri Lanka or what happened a few months earlier in Myanmar, there was a very bad earthquake. And because of the state of affairs in Myanmar, actually it's very sad. Very few countries came forward to help. We were one of them. and we had actually a military hospital set up literally in a matter of days, and our search and rescue teams went out there, and what external assistance came, a very large part of it came from India. If I were to switch you to a different direction, unfortunately an earthquake happened in Afghanistan as well. And even in Afghanistan, we were literally the first country, though the logistics to Afghanistan were very complicated, but we were the first country to respond. They had two earthquakes, one closer to the Pakistan border, the other more to the north. On both occasions we were out there. Now I'm citing this to you as an example that if you look at the neighborhood today, unfortunately in the world, it can be conflict, it can be natural disasters, it can be climate events, it can be COVID, it can be pandemic, it can be something which you and I cannot imagine today. When big problems happen to countries and they do not have the capacity to cope with it, they naturally turn to those who do. And in our region, there is a growing belief that the country which can be relied upon in this regard is India. That belief has come out of experience of a certain number of years. I mean, it was not automatically there. It happened because when COVID pandemic took place, almost every one of our neighboring countries got their first vaccines from us. When the Ukraine war started, and many countries found that their energy supplies were cut off or became too expensive, or their wheat, because Ukraine was a very major exporter of wheat, that wheat supplies got disrupted. It was we who stepped forward, even for supply of fertilizers. So over a period of time, this belief has grown in our neighborhood. I can tell you, when I travel in the neighborhood and I look even more than the government and the attitude of the public, that is something the public responds to. Apart from that, we ourselves feel that, look, we are the biggest country, we are the biggest economy. It's in our interest that the neighborhood works more closely with us. So we have actually today, in fact not today, for the last 10, 12 years, we have supported a very, very extensive, logistical sort of, I would say, connectivity with our neighborhood. And that kind, I mean, you all live in Europe today. Europe was not the way it was, the way it is now. I've seen a Europe 30, 40 years before, where it was not that easy traveling from one country to another. Somebody invested in the roads, somebody invested in the trains, somebody invested in making Europe so seamless as it is possible today. That is in our interest. In the Indian subcontinent, in South Asia to do, and that is what we are trying to do. I mean, if you travel today, want to go to Nepal, or you want goods to go to Bangladesh, or find a way of going to Sri Lanka, most of these are actually underwritten by us in some form or the other. Now that's been the positive side of it. There is also the challenging side of it, that often, because it is our neighbor, and because there is a shared history, there are people who are insecure, there are people with political agendas who want to advance their interest or their viewpoint by, in a way, going against us, by making us the target of their politics or target of their ideology or whatever it is. We have to contend with that. I mean, that is the way life is. I mean, you don't always get positive things. If it was so easy, why would people like us be around? So I think we have to take that in our stride. There are some exceptions. I mean, for us, the relationship with Pakistan is exceptional, because if you look at the world, I mean, forget for a moment this is, our region. Show me in the world in this day and age any country which actually has pursued the kind of policies which Pakistan has against its neighbor. That for decades, you've had these training camps, not secret training camps, they're all training camps in the big cities of Pakistan, very open, where the state, the military supports terrorism, and they've tried to normalize it as though it's their right to do it. I mean, nobody buys it anymore. I mean, everybody knows that these are people who are supported the state. Now, that is also, it's a very unpalatable reality, but it's one which, we cannot sort of be oblivious to. We have to build our policies saying, okay, that's how that particular neighbor is going to be. So, those who are far more, willing to work with us and be helpful, positive, we'll have to deal with them in that way. Those who do the kind of things which Pakistan does, we'll have to deal with it in a different way. Now, to what extent does the developments in the rest of the world affect it? It's hard to say. Look, people sitting far away will say things, sometimes with application of mind, sometimes not, sometimes the self-interest, sometimes carelessly. That will happen. But at the end of the day, I can tell you, whatever you might say, in this day and age, countries are more, I don't want to say they become more selfish, but they will do things only if it is of direct benefit to them. They will offer you free advice. If something happens, they'll say, no, please don't do that. It worries us if there is tension. Sometimes you hear people saying, like it happened during Operation Sindhu. Now, if you ask them, saying, oh, really, you're worried? Why don't you look at your own region and ask yourself, what are the levels of violence there? How much risks have you taken? How much worry the rest of us have about what you are doing? But, that's the nature of the world. People, what they say is not what they do. And we have to accept it in that spirit as well.